I'd like to thank you all for joining me on sharing my thoughts on how we can create a culture of safety excellence within organizations. I'm going to be sharing something from a report that came out from the Associated Builders and Contractors Association about their correlations between some safety indicators and ultimately safety culture and how you can implement that within your organization. First, before we get into that, I'm going to kind of explain to you a little bit about my history, my background. When I was young, my dad was working at a meatpacking facility. His job was to load trucks with product. So it'd be meat, it'd be pigs, it could be livestock. Ultimately, he would use the tools necessary to load the heavy loads into the back of the trucks itself. And one day he was loading pigs, and he's loading them onto the back of the truck, but the lift had broke, and they had deadlines that they had to meet. And so he was instructed to start loading the pigs using manual force. And so he was literally picking them up, loading them onto the back of the truck, and then the people on the truck would pull them deeper into the truck trailer itself. And for some reason, they were rushing and hurrying, and proper ergonomics weren't being adhered to. And what ended up happening was he compressed his lower vertebrae in his back, and it completely crushed the disc itself. And he's been living with that now for the past 30 years. And it's really made a big impact when you consider the ripple effect of workplace incidents. When you look at the statistics, sometimes the impacts to lives are lost. And so the impact of families and the impact to insurance companies and the impact of the company itself, yeah, that schedule was no longer adhered to like it had to be. But now for the last 30 years, he's had to live with a herniated disc in his back and a fusion that's ended up causing him grief over and over and over again. And then of course the constant workers' compensation insurance premiums. And so just thinking about safety culture, it's more than trying to prevent incidents. That's ultimately what we're trying to do, but we're trying to make sure that people go home at the end of the day in the same condition or better than when they came into work. And that kind of leads us into why SafetyTek exists a little bit. Craig and I founded SafetyTek with the sole purpose of making safety transparent and easier to access and way simpler to maintain. We found that workers in the field, we kind of understand how they view safety, and when you have regulatory authorities and bodies coming at them from various angles, telling them to do and enforcing them to do, it just makes it a little more of a pushback from the field manager's perspective when trying to get them to adhere to or comply to a specific safety regulation. Craig has worked as a construction safety officer as well for years, and constantly battling field workers' views on what safety is, who it's for, and why it needs to be done. The conclusion that we found was that workers feel that safety forms aren't really for them, they're for the company. And so they just need to do them more as a liability waiver, as opposed to actually an exercise in protecting themselves and their company and their colleagues, I suppose. So we sought to change that stigma of the negative energy around safety itself. So in today's talk, we're going to talk about what safety culture is. We're going to discuss how it's measured, what the leading indicators are around a strong safety culture, and then of course, how safety needs more data, or we need to unlock the data that exists within the documents that we collect on a regular basis. We're also going to have a Q&A at the very end, so feel free to ask questions in the chat box as we go, and we'll try to answer as many as we can at the very end of this webinar. If we don't get to your question, then we'll work diligently to respond to your questions afterwards via email, or we can connect for a phone call or something like that at the afterwards, and try to get all your questions answered. Also, at the very end of this, we're going to be sending out the recording and the slides for your own personal use as well. Feel free to distribute them to as many people as you'd like throughout your organization or your peers. So what is safety culture? It's the overall adoption of safety throughout an organization's various levels of management and workers. Safety culture is part of your core company culture. It's a collection of beliefs, values, and worldviews, and all employees and contractors of a company hold these specific values. Usually, culture is set at the top level of an organization and then propagated downwards to all workers. And the ways that we're working on creating safety cultures through the transparency, accountability, and then ensuring workers go home at the end of the day. So how do we measure safety culture? Well, traditionally, we've relied upon lagging indicators such as TRIR and DART rates, which we're going to get into, to determine how safe a company is. And we'll jump into the details on what those are. But I think leading indicators, which have a direct impact on lagging indicators, they paint a better picture of what safety actually is within a company itself. The funny thing is that lagging indicators rarely have an impact on leading indicators, but the leading indicators have a direct impact on lagging indicators. So we're going to talk about why that's important, what the correlation is, and a couple of exceptions to that rule as well around how a lagging indicator can actually impact a leading indicator. We're going to discuss that around the middle of the slide. Another thing I'd like to say is that safety audit compliance, while important, is not the best picture of what or how safe a company happens to be either. When you're fabricating a bunch of documentation on a regular basis, it's really useless having an audit score. Whereas with the leading indicators, the actual performance of safety is a far more valuable measurement of how safe a company happens to be. So the lagging indicators that we can look at today are the metrics that we're all used to, such as total recordable incident rate or frequency in some cases, and DART are examples of lagging indicators. Those are historical values that we can't change. They're metrics based on events that have occurred, and now we just have to live with them. And we're using those as potential safe, unsafe, or to determine how safe or unsafe a company happens to be. We're using that historical picture as well to either penalize or reward companies, and those faults on their record doesn't highlight any of the new initiatives that they've put in place or implemented in order to create a safety environment or a safer environment. So the lagging indicators, while they're valid, but they only show a small portion of that actual full story that we're trying to encompass. And so just a quick poll to see what metric do you find is the most valuable when it comes to safety culture? We're going to put up the poll on the screen and let you guys answer that. And then we'll quickly discuss before we jump into what leading indicators happen to be. Yeah, so when we're reading through the report on from the ABC, the correlated data around the lagging indicators and how we can impact all of them through leading indicators shows that with the 8 things that we're going to talk about in the next slide here, how we can actually reduce TRIR and DART rates significantly just through implementing some of these some of these measurements or some of these various different metrics into our. Is it going? Perfect. And we're going to discuss a little bit about how to implement some of these policies, or rather new initiatives, and then again, how do we measure those new initiatives' effectiveness on safety culture and the uptick in compliance from the workforce. And again, it's not so much about compliance as it is for performance, but then how do you champion field workers to make sure that they're actually feel included in that process itself. So we're going to close that poll. I think we got some answers. It looks like from what I'm seeing here, most people find that the most important measurement of safety is in fact your total recordable incident rate or frequency. Days away, are extremely important as well, because it doesn't just indicate that the incident happened, it also indicates how serious the incident is as well. I mean, the more days away you have from work, or having to find some alternate way to get a worker working again, can get creative as well, I suppose. But that's a good signal. Workers' compensation premiums are always one of those ones that are mandatory by law, of course, and so it's a good indicator. none of the above is interesting. I'm going to be curious to see if any of the things that I touch on are a great measurement or something that you guys are happen to do as well. So I think I'm just going to switch it over to continue and show. There we go. Thanks for participating, everyone. So some of the leading indicators that we're gonna chat about today are, all summarized in multiple research reports. But what I'm pulling the data directly from the Associated Builders and Contractors talks. So the leading indicators looking at the data from construction firms across North America in the ABC's national annual survey aggregate report. They determined that the 8 pillars that make up leading indicators. And since we released the announcement of this, we had 6 pillars initially. Since then, they've released a new report, and so I'm going to be encompassing the new data that has come out in that report. So there's actually 8 pillars now is what they found in order to improve a company's lagging indicators. And so we're just going to jump into each of these now. So toolbox talks. Toolbox talks are something that every worker becomes accustomed to. They're often the time when the whole group of workers gets together and they either summarize the hazards or controls that exist on site. You can cover a specific topic, sort of like a training session, or even review near misses that were submitted. All of those are great ideas. Just to have that meeting. I recall sitting in on these meetings when I was younger, going through some of my construction experience, and it seemed like they were just a practice in compliance. They weren't really meaningful in the sense that the manager, my manager, would stumble through some prepared toolbox talk topic that was distributed to him from his management or her management. And to be honest, I didn't really care about it at the time. Most people were told that they just had to deliver the talk and workers just had to sit in on it. The example of a lack of commitment from management is what I'm trying to highlight here, how it was not an engaging talk. It was very cut and dry, extremely difficult to sit through. And that's an example of a lack of commitment from that management. So, when management cares, they're going to come up with creative ways to deliver these talks. They're going to come up with the different ways to engage your workers and to get them involved in the process. It shouldn't just be it's not a session where somebody's talking to an audience. It should be bigger than that. It should be, okay, well, ask questions, ask open-ended questions, make sure that your workers are responding and answering in an appropriate way, and let them contribute as well to the talk and get them some buy-in. The frequency of these talks has a direct impact on safety culture as well as your lagging indicators, TRIR and DART levels. And companies that perform daily toolbox safety talks, it's been a correlated data of an 85% decrease in TRIR. So that is a massive impact for such a small detail in just increasing frequency of toolbox talks. Keeping them consistent, workers will know what to expect when they start performing these on a routine basis, on a daily or weekly basis. They know that they're going to be hearing, or they'll have a voice to express safety concerns on a regular basis, and have a strict schedule. Don't have it mixed up. Some days in the afternoon, some days in the morning. If you happen to want to roll this out successfully, keep it consistent. Keep your workers knowing what's going to happen. Get them into a routine of it. And it takes 60 days to form a habit, so that give it some time as well. The next pillar is substance abuse programs. We find that 1 in 3 accidents on site occur due to substance abuse, and that's in North America alone. It makes it having a substance abuse program makes a very difficult conversation into a regularly talked about topic, and it opens up the airwaves to allow workers to discuss topics like substance abuse, but also it gives them a sense of psychological safety, and that's what's necessary to have a strong safety culture. When they don't feel like they're going to be penalized for mentioning something that's potentially unsafe, they feel like it's a safe environment. They're able to express their concerns without being made fun of or potentially laid off. Substance abuse can also end up costing a vast amount of capital in short order. Between increased absenteeism, drops in productivity, increased healthcare expenses and disability claims, it seems like a very worthy investment to put something in place. And just by simply having a policy in place so that workers know how they can approach this topic, it can reduce your TRIR rates by up to 60%. Safety performance reviews. The third pillar. Safety program performance reviews should be completed a couple times per year, typically every 6 months, and are a way to create accountability for the workers. They also allow management to review what's working and, more importantly, what isn't working, so that we know that not to invest anymore into a program that potentially could be just failing anyway and creating animosity between your workers and management and safety teams itself. Understanding where safety is breaking down is an important part to implementing a successful safety culture. And measuring how many incidents took place, how many near misses were submitted, where did the survey results come from the field staff, what do they look like, and overall engagement from your workforce itself, they're all key and they need to be looked at regularly. Looking at this in practice, where leadership actually measures the performance of safety program, has been shown to reduce your total recordable incident rates by up to 59% and your DART rates by 60%. And so that's a significant impact, and all of these add up over the course of a full period. So here's where I'm going to talk about how your lagging indicators can actually impact your leading indicators. Actioning lagging indicators is a great way to reduce your TRIR and DART rates. Sorry, one sec. One of the ingredients to successful safety culture is by making sure your workforce understands what their contribution is to the lagging indicators. When they hear the terms TRIR or TRIF or TRIF or DART, do they know what that means? Do they recognize the terms and do they understand how they contribute to those metrics? Are they aware of how their actions affect those specifically? This is the moment in which we as management and safety professionals should take the time to inform the workforce about those topics. For example, have a safety toolbox talk in the morning, review past incidents and the investigations and the outcomes of what those investigations revealed with your team. This tends to have an impact on everyone's view of what TRIR and DART rates happens to be. Simply reviewing your past incidents bubbles the topics back up to the surface so that they don't fall into the realm of complacency. It reactivates people's thought processes around what safety is and how, again, in that day that they were working when the incident occurred, what were they doing that could have potentially made an impact? Supervisory safety meetings from your employers. So the quote is, the best way to mitigate hazards is to know what they are to begin with. I love the quote because it means that there's more of a everyone works together to identify what exists on site. It's not just a single person out for themselves. It's a team of people collaboratively working towards identifying what those hazards happen to be. We want to discuss them collectively. We want to reduce the unnecessary risk to a tolerable level. And it takes the experience of many as opposed to the view of just one. So safety program performance reviews should be completed twice per year. They create accountability at the worker level, but management can also review again what is working, what's not working, and they can practice, put into practice what leadership measures they should be putting into play. The meetings should cover status report on site activities, what's happening, what's planned, what could be happening, pre-planning activities, lessons learned, reviewing those lessons learned again based on incident investigation reports and outcomes, and then review any serious incidents or near misses that did happen from the time of the last meeting itself, and then of course evaluating what could have been done as a better job, almost like a post-mortem. And that's been shown to reduce both TRIR and DART levels significantly by over 50%. Funny enough, we would think that it's obvious, but the use of personal protective equipment is vitally important. It's the first line of defense when things go wrong in the field, of course. But how many people have dropped by on a job site and watched the workers scatter to put on their safety glasses, or heard someone yell, "Oh, safety guys here"? The use of PPE can be monitored through regular safety audits of your workers in the field. Send your safety staff out or go out yourself. Make the observations in the field, rank them also as in terms of severity. And it'll give yourselves and management the perfect picture to see how your workforce actually uses PPE and if it's actually used appropriately for the job. because it's the first line of defense for when something goes wrong, we all take credit for it in our risk reduction. But if workers don't use it and we don't enforce it appropriately, it becomes a false safeguard, and we end up with higher tolerated risk levels at the field level. And just getting them to use the PPE has been measured to reduce TRIR and DART levels by up to 55%. So that's a significant impact to your overall lagging indicator. And again, it's going to impact your insurance premiums in the very end as well by lowering them significantly. So just getting them bought in, maybe having them do a PPE inspection on a regular basis, and then action that PPE inspection to make sure that they have, they don't have degraded tools or degraded PPE, or their gloves don't have holes in them, or their glasses, they can see out of them. That's probably why they're not wearing them to begin with. Pre-planning for job site safety. So this is something that I hear on a regular basis. The lack of communication between project teams and safety teams. And the issue that I hear about is that the safety teams brought into the project too close to the project kickoff date. So then as they identify potential issues when they get entered into the project, it's too late to actually implement anything productive. So the project gets started with a rushed safety plan in place, and while the safety team tries to play catch up, I suppose. The pre-planning process should engage right from the very start of the project creation. There's a lot of money to be saved in involving safety teams from the very start, because it's always easier and simpler to build a safety program into the project than it is to add it on after. When safety is built in, it showcases the commitment to safety from management, which reinforces workers' attitudes towards safety as well. And ultimately, it lays the groundwork for strong safety culture. It's proven to reduce TRIR TRIF by up to 53% and your days away by 54%. That's a huge impact when you're talking about project performance as well. You're decreasing work stoppages, unplanned work stoppages caused by occupational injuries, and you're going to hit your project timelines on a far superior basis, far more regular, repeatable basis. So again, build your safety into the project as you're doing your project kickoffs, and it's known to see the impact that can have on your project timelines. Goal setting, something that we all want to do more of. Something we all, can say. It's really easy to say, but when it comes to actually implementing program goal setting, the measurement becomes a difficult piece of that puzzle. And so the simple act of just having to think of a goal, decide on what you're going to measure to accomplish that goal, and then at the end, evaluate all the measurements to determine whether that goal has been successfully passed or failed. Just that simple act itself of thinking about that process can increase your safety culture itself. Safety program goal setting is necessary for anything to be declared successful. And so without a goal in mind, everything's observational or anecdotal. And in order to achieve a goal, something must be measured. And so in order to measure it, the processes must be in place to enable the extraction of the information necessary. And this might be a spreadsheet that someone fills out. It could be an email, it could be a platform technology such as SafetyTek itself. But either way, the simple act of having to think of it and decide what to measure in order to deem a goal achieved or failed, putting that into practice, all reinforce safety culture itself. It's known to have a 48% reduction in TRIR levels and a 50% reduction in your days away, which is significant impact on your overall workers' compensation as well. So with that in mind, having been in the situation of where an incident has occurred and watching the ripple effect of what can happen there, my conclusion is that safety just needs more data, and safety professionals just need to know how to harness that data. We're collecting it on a regular basis. We all have it, but we just don't have the tools necessary to implement anything really well. So what ends up happening is you collect all this documentation from the field, it trickles in on paper form. You'll get it either a week late or a month late, or potentially you might get it daily, but then you have to extract that information off the paper to get it usable. And so you're transcribing information daily, all the time, into Excel, or maybe you have a fantastic database, but that the information isn't just populated in the database, it needs to be put in there, which creates this massive administrative burden. And so what we do is we're replacing the entire process of safety today We're taking it from the paper processes, the transcription, the database system, and then the lagging indicator reporting, and we're making it streamlined in real time so that we collect the data at the field level. We allow that transparency to occur where safety management can log in. They can see exactly what's happening from every location in the field itself, and then monitor it from anywhere. And so that's what we're up to, and how we can help with safety culture itself by reinforcing a lot of these initiatives that you want to put in place by leveraging the information that you're going to collect. So to recap, safety needs to be a core part of your overall company culture. Safety culture is just a piece of your overall encompassing umbrella company culture itself. And here's how you can measure all of your various leading and lagging indicators through a platform technology like SafetyTek. And I feel like at this point, a lot of these systems that I mentioned earlier, like the toolbox talk systems, the substance abuse programs, and monitoring and maintaining it, a lot of them can take up a lot of effort to maintain. And massive companies that have a lot of budget and large safety teams can easily implement this because they can afford the overhead cost of a lot of the transcription services of the administrative burden. But companies that 90% of the construction industry, for example, are under 100 employees and just don't simply have the budgets to afford to implement all of these systems and maintain them all. So that's kind of what we're trying to get across here. Lagging indicators and leading indicators, again, leading indicators can impact directly the lagging indicators, of course, and those 8 pillars are vital. Even implementing one of them is going to have a massive impact on your overall safety culture. The lagging indicators can impact leading indicators only when we choose to, review post-mortem, for example, or some type of incident and outcome that we happen to come on to realize. And safety just needs more information. It sounds simple, but it's really a larger problem than that. It's that the data that we do have today is locked on paper, it's locked in file cabinets, and will likely never be viewed again. And we can discuss that topic a little bit more thoroughly, off the point of this webinar here, if you're interested in chatting with me a little bit more. But then again, those systems that I mentioned earlier can take a huge, massive administrative burden to implement and maintain and make sure that it's actually working. So we know the pain, we felt the pain, and now we're looking to solve it.